Hey guys. Tonight we're slipping quietly into the golden sands of ancient Egypt, where moonlight kissed the river Nile and silence carried the weight of secrets no one dared to whisper aloud. The air smells faintly of lotus and incense, and somewhere in the distance, a flute hums a trembling note. You're standing at the edge of a ritual older than memory itself, a wedding night not made of romance, but of fear, duty, and divine expectation. And trust me, you wouldn't have survived 5 minutes of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? What time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step barefoot through the sands, following a faint trail of torchlight that snakes toward a small mud brick house by the river. The wedding feast has ended. The laughter outside fades into murmurs. Inside, everything feels still, eerily still. The bride sits on a woven mat, head bowed, her wrists painted with henna spirals that symbolize eternity. Her eyes flicker toward the curtain where her new husband waits. But that isn't what terrifies her. No, it's the ritual. See, in ancient Egypt, marriage wasn't just a union between two people. It was a contract witnessed by the gods. Every vow was believed to echo through the divine realm. You couldn't whisper, "I do," without half a dozen deities tuning in like celestial auditors. And for the bride, that meant her wedding night wasn't private. It was sacred, watched, judged. The women of the household had spent the entire day preparing her. They sang hymns to Hathor, the goddess of love and fertility, while grinding exotic resins into powder. The air thickened with myrrh, honey, and crushed lotus petals, but beneath the fragrance, fear lingered like a shadow that refused to leave. You can almost smell it, sweet, suffocating, clinging to the back of your throat. They told her that on this night, she would enter the realm of the gods. That sounded poetic, until you realized it meant losing your autonomy. The ancient Egyptians believed the first union between husband and wife reenacted the sacred marriage of Isis and Osiris, a myth so cosmic that any imperfection might anger the gods. And you definitely didn't want to anger a pantheon that thought plagues and crocodiles were appropriate feedback mechanisms. Somewhere, an old priest mutters a blessing outside, tracing symbols on a clay amulet. You imagine him shaking his head, half pious, half weary, because he's seen this fear before. Every young bride trembled like this, clutching her charms, whispering for mercy from deities who rarely answered softly. There's something almost cinematic about it, the golden lamp flickering, the shadows dancing across the mud walls, the faint sound of a harp still echoing from the courtyard. You can hear the Nile beyond, whispering to itself like it knows every story ever told. And you realize, in this world, love wasn't personal, it was political, mystical, supervised by the heavens. The bride lifts her gaze just enough to glimpse a carved figurine of Hathor placed beside the bed, smiling. Serene, terrifying, that goddess was supposed to bless her fertility. But to the bride, that serene smile looked suspiciously like judgment. You can feel her heartbeat quicken, thud, 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 beneath layers of linen. Someone hands her a cup of sweet date wine, said to soften the spirit. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, but she drinks it anyway. Because refusing would mean defying ritual. And that's the thing about ancient Egypt, ritual wasn't just tradition, it was survival. The gods didn't forgive mistakes easily. If a single word in the chant was misplaced, if the incense burned too fast, if the lamp flickered at the wrong moment, people thought it might doom not only the marriage, but the entire household. Imagine your wedding planner having that kind of power. You hear the door creak. The women step back. The bride rises slowly, trembling but composed. Her anklets chime like faint silver bells. The moment stretches, too long, too fragile, and for an instant, you wonder what's worse, the ritual itself, or the fear of disappointing the divine. Then the curtain parts, and moonlight slips in, painting her in pale blue. The world seems to hold its breath. Somewhere, the priest outside whispers the final words of blessing, "May her body be fertile, her soul obedient, her name eternal." There's beauty in it, yes, but also tragedy. Because in that blessing lies the expectation that she belongs not to herself, but to gods, husband, and fate. You stand there, an invisible witness, watching as ancient beliefs tighten their grip around her like silk cords. She steps forward, and the lamp flickers once more, shadows bending like bowing servants. The Nile sighs. The world moves on, and as you close your eyes, you can almost hear the quiet rustle of history itself, ancient, delicate, and terrifyingly human. The night stretches longer than it should, as if time itself hesitates to move forward. The air feels heavy, not just from the incense, but from the invisible weight of expectation pressing down on everyone in that small room. You can almost feel it on your skin, the way belief can become thicker than the air itself. Because tonight isn't only about two people, it's about two families, two bloodlines, two worlds, and above all, it's about the gods. In ancient Egypt, a wedding was not a private celebration, it was a legal and divine contract. The papyrus might say the words, marriage agreement, but what it really meant was, you are bound not just by law, but by eternity. And that's not as romantic as it sounds. Imagine signing a document where one side of the contract isn't your partner, but Osiris, Lord of the underworld. That's not exactly the kind of wedding vibe you'd put on Pinterest. The bride's family would provide a dowry, of course, gold jewelry, a few linen tunics, maybe even a servant or two, but all of that was just the human part. The divine portion was sealed through ceremony. The priest would bless the union in the name of Hathor, protector of women, and of Mut, the mother goddess. But there was always one condition, the woman's purity. Not purity as in innocence, but in spiritual cleanliness. The Egyptians believed that physical contact carried spiritual residue. So, before the ceremony, the bride had to go through a day-long ritual cleansing, bathing in the Nile at dawn, being rubbed with oil, then covered in fine sand that absorbed impurities. It's like a spa day from hell. You can picture her, standing in that river, shivering as the current wraps around her legs. The priestess nearby chants softly, sprinkling crushed lotus petals into the water. The petals float around her like pink whispers. For a moment, she might even feel calm, until she remembers why she's there. They say the gods listen most closely during cleansing. Every prayer, Every breath counts. And if you're unlucky enough to sneeze during the chant, well, some texts suggest that was considered a bad omen. Imagine trying to hold in a sneeze because you think it might ruin your marriage and offend a crocodile god. But the ritual had a logic of its own. The Egyptians believed that order, ma'ah, was the foundation of life. Marriage was one way to uphold that order. Two people coming together wasn't just about emotion. It was a symbolic act of restoring cosmic balance. So when a man and woman married, it was like the gods themselves were reuniting through them. The husband represented Horus, the protector, the wife, Isis, the nurturer. Their union wasn't private. It was a reenactment of the universe being kept from chaos. And suddenly, the fear makes sense. Who wouldn't be terrified, knowing your wedding night might decide whether the cosmos stays intact? Inside the room, the bride glances at the amulet on her wrist, a small charm shaped like the eye of Horus. It's meant to protect her from envy and harm. But even the charm seems to stare back at her. Unblinking, the walls close in a little. The perfume burns faintly in her nose. Her husband, standing silently nearby, is equally nervous, though no one will ever admit it. Men, too, were bound by the contract. They swore to provide, to protect, and to honor the gods through their household. Breaking those vows wasn't just immoral, it was a crime against the divine. And if you broke it, you might find yourself cursed with barren fields or sleepless nights haunted by the spirits of disapproval. There's a kind of poetic irony here. Love under supervision. Even affection had to be scheduled between offerings and prayers. The priest might say, "May she bear him many sons," and everyone would nod solemnly. Pretending this blessing didn't sound like a performance review. You step closer, the lamplight flickering across the clay walls. Hieroglyphs decorate the plaster, drawings of birds, ankhs, and serpents coiled around symbols of eternity. They're beautiful but unsettling, as if they're alive, listening. In one corner, a small statue of Isis gazes down, her expression unreadable. She's the goddess who resurrected her husband from the dead. Yet even she couldn't escape the weight of ritual. The women of Egypt modeled themselves after her, faithful, devoted, powerful in silence. But you can sense the contradiction. Behind the reverence, there's exhaustion. Behind the devotion, a quiet fear. Because every ritual, no matter how sacred, eventually becomes a cage. The bride exhales slowly. Someone outside begins to sing, a lullaby. Soft and strange, the kind that sounds older than language. The words drift through the curtain, like dust caught in candlelight. You feel the shift in the air. The contract has been spoken. The gods have been invoked. And the moment, terrifyingly enough, is irreversible. For the rest of her life, this woman will carry not just the title of wife, but the invisible weight of divine obligation. Her body, her voice, her silence, all of it now belongs to something greater, something eternal, something that never asked her consent. And as the lamp flickers, casting her shadow on the wall, it looks almost like two people, her and the goddess she's forced to become. Outside, the Nile murmurs quietly, reflecting the moon's pale shimmer. You can almost hear it whisper. Contracts can bind hearts, but they can also chain them. The night hums softly, and history exhales. The air inside the chamber thickens. curling with smoke from the last stick of incense. It's that kind of smoke that doesn't just rise, it dances. Spirals, clings to your eyelashes and clothes like it wants to remember you. You can almost taste the sweetness of the resin mixed with something metallic underneath. Like old copper coins left in the sun. The priest's chant fades, leaving a hush that feels too deliberate. Outside, the Nile continues its endless whisper. Inside, the bride sits motionless on a low stool, her hands resting in her lap. The gold rings on her fingers gleam faintly in the lamplight. Her hair has been oiled, braided, and perfumed until it shines like obsidian. But her eyes look far away, fixed on something beyond the room, beyond the night itself. Because this isn't just a wedding night, it's a divine offering. Tonight, she isn't merely a wife. She's a bridge between the mortal and the immortal, a living vessel through which the gods reaffirm their order. That sounds poetic, doesn't it? Until you realize what that actually meant for her. To the people of ancient Egypt, the gods weren't abstract ideas, they were present, alive in every shadow. Every ripple of the river. They watched, they listened, and sometimes, they judged. Marriage, to them, was a sacred reenactment of divine union. The groom embodied a god, most often Osiris or Horus, and the bride became the goddess Isis or Hathor. And in this symbolic reenactment, she belonged to the divine before she belonged to her husband. The priest whispers prayers, invoking the blessing of Hathor, the lady of love, beauty, and joy, but there's an edge to his voice, a kind of trembling reverence, as though even he is afraid of what might happen if the goddess doesn't approve. A small bronze mirror lies beside the bride. You can imagine her glancing into it, seeing her reflection shimmer through the incense haze. But perhaps she doesn't recognize herself. Maybe she sees the goddess she's expected to embody staring back, calm, radiant, and terrifyingly perfect. Outside, the women of the household wait in silence. It's a strange quiet, like everyone's holding their breath for something divine to occur. They believe that if the gods are pleased, the union will bless not only the couple but the entire household. If the gods aren't pleased, well, people start seeing omens in spilled oil or broken lamps. One servant slips inside to light another candle. But even that small gesture feels ritualistic. Every movement here means something. Nothing is accidental. The bride's breath, the way she folds her hands, the direction she turns her head, it all follows an invisible choreography set by centuries of belief. And you, standing there unseen, can almost feel the tension. The priest raises his hand, dipping his fingers into a small bowl of perfumed oil. He marks the bride's forehead with a gentle touch, murmuring, "May the goddess dwell within you." The words hang in the air like a spell. You'd think that sounds comforting, but imagine being told that a god is expected to dwell within you on your wedding night. Romantic? Not exactly. Terrifying? Absolutely. There's something profoundly human in her fear. You can sense her wanting to believe that this ritual means safety, prosperity, maybe even love, but beneath that hope, there's another truth. The ritual is bigger than her, and always will be. The oil on her skin begins to tingle. The incense stings her throat. The atmosphere grows thicker. Every sense she has, smell, touch, hearing, blurs until it's hard to tell whether she's in her own body anymore. And that's the point. The priest continues chanting, invoking names older than memory: Hathor, Isis, Nephthys, Mut. Each name vibrates softly through the room, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. The sound is hypnotic, pulling her into a trance-like calm. She isn't just herself now. She's the goddess incarnate, whether she believes it or not. The husband, standing nearby, bows his head, waiting for the signal, but he, too, must feel the absurdity of it. The idea that love has to pass through divine bureaucracy before it can touch flesh. You might think it's superstition, but to them, it was survival. The gods gave life, the gods could take it away. So every act of intimacy had to be sanctified, made holy, wrapped in incense and fear. And this night, this ritual, is where holiness and humanity collide. She rises slowly, and the candlelight catches the gold threads of her linen robe, making her glow faintly. She's beautiful, yes, but in a way that looks almost painful, like a statue forced to breathe. When she moves toward the bed, the priest steps aside, whispering a final blessing. May her womb be a temple, and may no god find fault. That line, it sounds like poetry, but it's really pressure dressed as piety. You can almost hear her heart pounding against that silent decree. There's a strange beauty in the scene, though, isn't there? The duality of reverence and fear. The humans trying to please immortal beings by pretending to be divine themselves. And yet, it's also haunting. Because in becoming the bride of the gods, she loses something that can't be easily reclaimed, her sense of self. As the priest leaves, the room darkens, the flame wavers, the Nile outside murmurs its endless lullaby. And for a moment, you wonder whether the gods ever asked for this, or whether it was humanity's fear that created them in the first place. You breathe out slowly, feeling the weight of centuries press down, and the sound of the wind outside seems to whisper something old and soft, something like pity. The ritual has begun, the divine has entered the room, and from this point on, nothing will ever be entirely human again. The door closes with a low wooden sigh, sealing in the fragrance that's been building for hours. You can almost feel it thickening the air. That layered perfume of myrrh, cinnamon, and blue lotus, sweet enough to dizzy, sacred enough to demand silence. This is the room of incense, where the final preparations take place. And if you thought the ceremony outside was strange, what happens here is even stranger. The bride sits at the center of the chamber on a woven mat embroidered with gold thread. She looks small against the walls painted with scenes of Hathor dancing among palm trees. The flicker of the lamps makes the painted goddess seem to move, her smile curling and vanishing in rhythm with the flames. You could almost believe the goddess herself is watching, curious to see how this mortal version of her performs. Around the bride, 3 women move with rehearsed precision. They are priestesses, older, quiet, wrapped in linen that rustles like whispers. Each holds a bowl, one with powdered incense, one with fragrant oil, one with thin papyrus strips covered in strange hieroglyphs. Their faces are calm, but there's a solemn edge in their eyes. They know what's about to happen isn't simply symbolic. You inhale with them, catching the scent that burns your lungs just a little. The smoke twists into shapes you can almost recognize: serpents, eyes, spirals. Maybe it's imagination, maybe not. The lead priestess kneels before the bride and dips her fingers into the oil. The mixture glows faintly amber in the lamplight. This, she says softly, is the essence of purification. Her voice is steady but carries the gravity of repetition, a ritual recited countless times before. Never questioned. The oil touches the bride's skin, cool first, then warm, then hot enough to sting. The scent of myrrh seeps into her pores. She flinches slightly, but doesn't speak. The priestess traces slow circles along her arms, murmuring a blessing that sounds more like a warning. You must enter the chamber of man as one who carries the favor of gods. She says, no shadow may cling to you. It sounds poetic, but the subtext is fear. In ancient Egypt, impurity wasn't a stain you could wash away, it was a spiritual contagion. A bride who entered marriage unclean might draw the wrath of the gods, or worse, doom her husband's lineage, and the people truly believed that. You can see why the women around her take no chances. The incense grows heavier, the smoke a living curtain between you and the world outside. Each wisp seems to hum faintly, a chorus of sacred chemicals working their way into every breath. The second priestess steps forward with the bowl of powdered incense. She scatters it into the brazier, and the smoke bursts into a pale gold haze. For her body, she whispers, to be invisible to envy, untouched by evil. Invisible to envy, imagine that. A blessing born from fear of being seen. Even beauty, in this place, is a potential curse. The third priestess begins burning the papyrus strips. One by one, the hieroglyphs curl, blacken, then vanish in sparks. Each paper carries a spell, a fragment of an ancient hymn asking for Hather's favor. For the goddess to close the eyes of demons and open the womb of the faithful. You can't tell if that's reassuring or terrifying. Probably both. The bride begins to cough softly. The smoke stings her throat. One priestess offers her a drink of honey water. The sweetness cuts through the bitterness of incense. But not entirely. Her eyes water, and she blinks rapidly, as if holding back tears that aren't allowed here. There's a rhythm to all this. Oil, smoke, fire, whisper, repeat. The sequence continues until the bride is half dreaming. Her body coated in a sheen of oil. Her hair heavy with perfume. The air hums with heat. It's almost hypnotic. You start to lose track of where one ritual ends and the next begins. Outside, the moon rises higher. The Nile carries on, utterly indifferent to what happens in the rooms of humans. A crocodile might be gliding past the banks now, its eyes catching the same moonlight that falls on the bride's face. Everything feels connected, the river, the smoke, the fear. When the ritual ends, the lead priestess lifts a final censer and swings it slowly around the bride, drawing a perfect circle of smoke. Now, she says, her tone reverent but weary, you are unseen by mortal sin, seen only by the divine. The bride exhales, perhaps in relief, perhaps because she can finally breathe again. For a moment, the smoke thins, and she looks almost human once more. But that won't last long. Because this ritual isn't cleansing her of fear. It's teaching her how to live with it. The priestesses leave in silence, their white robes disappearing into the shadows beyond the doorway. The last one pauses, her hand lingering on the stone frame, and murmurs something almost like pity. May the gods be gentle with you." Then she's gone. You're left in the haze with the bride, who sits very still, eyes unfocused. The golden smoke curls upward, coiling around the lamp until the light itself seems to flicker in slow motion. You can hear her breathing, soft, uneven, almost like someone trying not to wake the past. And in that silence, it hits you, the irony. This ritual meant to bless her, to cleanse her, is the very thing suffocating her now. The air is sacred, yes, but it's also unbreathable. Outside, the first gust of desert wind rattles the papyrus shutters, and the smell of the Nile drifts in, a reminder that somewhere beyond this incense prison, the world still moves freely. The gods, it seems, are already watching. The scent hits you before the sound does. It's thick, sweet, and ancient, like melted sugar left too long on the fire. The air hums faintly, shimmering from the heat of the oil lamps. You can almost taste it. That syrupy perfume coating the back of your throat, refusing to let go. This is the moment when beauty turns into something oppressive, and fragrance becomes fear. The bride is alone now, sitting on the edge of the woven mat, her body still glistening with the oils from the ritual. They've told her these mixtures are sacred, gifts from the gods, brewed from resins, herbs, and the tears of certain desert plants that only bloom at night. But what they didn't mention is how much it burns. She presses a trembling hand to her arm. The skin there feels warm, then hot, then almost searing. The mixture, part myrrh, part honey, part something called dust of eternity, is meant to purify her flesh, to prepare her for divine union. You might call it skincare. She'd probably call it suffering. The irony? The ancient Egyptians were obsessed with scent. Perfume wasn't just cosmetic, it was moral. To smell pleasant was to be close to the gods. To smell ordinary was to risk offending them. In their mythology, even the afterlife smelled like blue lotus and sweet resin. The unperfumed? They were unworthy of eternity. So, the priests went all in. They made perfumes that could outlast death itself, literally. Archaeologists have opened tombs and found traces of ancient scent still clinging to the jars, like the echo of a forgotten ritual. And right now, you can imagine this bride, drenched in those same fragrances, a living offering of aroma and devotion. She adjusts her linen robe, careful not to disturb the sacred markings drawn across her shoulders in oil. The patterns resemble flowing water, meant to invoke fertility, but her skin stings beneath every swirl. She shifts slightly, uncomfortable. There's no escape. The room feels smaller with every breath. And somewhere deep inside, the fear begins to bloom. It starts quietly. Just the thought that she's about to step into a moment that belongs more to the gods than to her. But it grows, curling through her chest like the smoke that still lingers in the air. What if she's not pure enough? What if the gods are displeased? What if this pain means she's been rejected? You can almost hear her inner voice, soft, desperate, rehearsed. She's been told since childhood that the first night of marriage decides her worth. Not as a woman, but as a vessel for the divine order. That's a lot of pressure to carry in a body that's currently on fire. She reaches for the small alabaster jar beside her, a mix of perfumed salve and ground natron, meant to cool the spirit. She rubs it onto her palms and inhales deeply. The scent is lighter this time, floral, almost comforting. For a fleeting second, she feels human again, but the relief doesn't last. Because outside the door, footsteps echo. Soft, measured, deliberate. Someone's coming. Her heartbeat quickens. It's the priest again. He doesn't enter fully, just lingers at the threshold. The gods are pleased, he says simply, his voice smooth as stone. The union may proceed. Proceed. That word lands like a verdict. You can feel her shoulders tense, her breath falter. It's strange how polite fear can be. She nods slightly, though she doesn't meet his eyes. He sets a small clay dish on the ground, a final offering. In it burns another substance. Darker, sharper, with a faint metallic tang. The smell changes instantly, overtaking everything else. This, she knows, is kesset oil, sacred to the goddess Sekhmet, the lioness of destruction and renewal. They believe it drives away evil spirits. But it also reminds everyone of something fierce and uncontrollable. Maybe that's the point. You can almost imagine the priest's calm expression as he says, "Let no shadow cross this room tonight." Then he's gone, his footsteps fading into the corridor. The bride closes her eyes. The silence that follows isn't peaceful, it's expectant. The air vibrates with too many meanings. The perfume, once meant to sanctify, now feels like a trap. It fills her lungs, presses against her skull, insists on being noticed. Perfume and fear, they're twin siblings here. One sweet, one bitter, both intoxicating. You glance around the room, and even the objects seem complicit. The jars of oil glimmer like watching eyes. The bronze mirror catches a fragment of light and throws it across the wall, an accidental halo that feels unearned. Somewhere, the wind sneaks through the cracks in the door, carrying the faint sound of water against stone. The Nile, eternal witness, it's been listening to this same ritual for thousands of years. Unchanged, indifferent. You wonder if any bride ever found peace in this process, or if the calm they describe is really just surrender. The perfume thickens again, curling upward toward the ceiling beams. Your own breath feels slower, heavier. The warmth of the lamp softens, and the shadows begin to sway lazily against the painted walls. The bride lifts her head, eyes glistening in the low light. Her fear doesn't show in her posture, only in her hands, clasped too tightly. Knuckles pale, she whispers a prayer, not to the gods of love or beauty, but to Ma'a, the goddess of balance. Her voice is barely audible. Let me not be broken by what is sacred. It's a quiet rebellion, small but real, the kind that only the gods, or the desert, might hear. And outside, somewhere beyond the incense, the crocodiles of the Nile glide silently through black water, patient and ancient, as if they already know how this story ends. The night has grown deeper now, its silence pressed close against the clay walls. The bride sits in the same room, but the air has changed. The perfumes have settled, the lamps burn lower, and the atmosphere feels, how do you describe it, charged? As if the air itself is waiting. You can almost hear it hum, low and steady, the way a beehive does before a storm. Outside, a chorus of night insects begins their song. The Nile murmurs somewhere beyond the window slit. Patient as always. Inside, the only sound is breathing, hers. Shallow and measured, but soon, she won't be alone. Because before the bride can cross the threshold to her husband, there's one final ritual. The Egyptians called it the sealing of the spirit, though the priests gave it a dozen different names across the centuries. The idea was simple: before love, before union, you had to protect the soul from everything that might envy it. And that meant calling upon the unseen. 3 women enter the chamber again, older relatives this time. Not priestesses. Their faces are serious, but kind. They carry baskets of herbs and small amulets shaped like tiny gods. Their sandals scrape softly on the floor. The sound rhythmic, grounding. One woman hums a low tune. A lullaby that sounds half like a prayer, half like a memory. You can almost see the relief flicker in the bride's eyes. These aren't divine representatives. They're family, mothers, aunts, the human part of all this ceremony. For the first time tonight, she's surrounded by voices she's known since childhood. The eldest woman sets the basket down and begins to scatter the herbs, crushed mint, dried papyrus, and blue lotus, around the perimeter of the room. She moves clockwise, whispering, for protection, for peace, for silence. Each word lands softly, like a blanket laid over fear. The second woman kneels beside the bride and takes her hands. Her palms are rough from years of grinding flour, of living in the world outside the temple's perfection. "You'll be fine, child," she murmurs, almost like she's saying it to herself. "The gods favor the brave." And there it is again, that small, necessary lie people tell each other to make the unbearable seem sacred. The third woman holds up the amulets, little charms of turquoise, lapis lazuli, and faience, shaped like the eye of Horus. The scarab, the ankh. She ties them one by one onto a linen cord that she drapes around the bride's neck. "Each eye watches a corner of your heart," she says, "so nothing unholy can enter." It's comforting and eerie at the same time. The thought of being constantly watched, even by protection. You can hear the faint rustle as they continue their work. One woman sprinkles salt along the doorway. Another waves a small bronze mirror through the air to reflect back any evil glance that might sneak in. In ancient Egypt, envy wasn't just emotion, it was a weapon. A look of jealousy could curse someone. They believed, unless the energy was deflected. That's why, on nights like this, no one outside the household was allowed to see the bride. Even joy was dangerous when the world was full of watching eyes. One of the women begins to whisper an old charm. "Eyes that envy shall close. Mouths that curse shall choke. Hearts that hate shall turn to dust before the Nile." It's half melody, half spell. You can almost feel the air shift again, cooler, denser, like the very sound of protection taking form. The bride closes her eyes. The voices around her are soft, reassuring. For the first time all night, she allows herself to exhale without trembling. Maybe this is the closest thing to comfort she'll get. And then, from somewhere near the doorway, a soft clink. The eldest woman is laying small bowls filled with milk and honey, offerings for the benevolent spirits who guard thresholds. Spirits like to be fed, she says matter-of-factly. If they're fed, they protect. If they're hungry, they wander. That's a sentence you don't forget easily. As the ritual continues, something odd happens. The fear doesn't vanish, but it changes shape. It's still there, tight in the chest, heavy in the stomach, but now it's surrounded by gentleness. It's as if the women's presence weaves a small shield made of love and habit. Because beneath all the divine superstition, beneath the talk of gods and spirits, this is what protection truly looks like, one generation standing watch over another. You can almost imagine how many times this same ritual has unfolded in the same quiet way. Thousands of brides, thousands of nights, thousands of whispers carried away by the same Egyptian wind. The women finish their work. The eldest kisses the bride's forehead and murmurs, "Don't speak to anyone but your husband tonight." The gods listen most closely when love is new. They gather their baskets and leave. The door closes softly. The silence that follows isn't empty anymore, it feels alive. Full of whispers you can't quite make out. As if the herbs and amulets themselves are humming. The bride tilts her head. Listening, maybe she hears something you don't. And you wonder, are the spirits real? Or is faith itself a kind of protection? The lamp flame dips, then steadies. The smoke curls upward once more, tracing invisible patterns across the ceiling. And somewhere outside, in the distant dark, a jackal howls. To the Egyptians, that sound was sacred, the voice of Anubis, guardian of souls, a sign that the underworld itself was paying attention. The bride closes her eyes, whispering a final prayer into the hush. "Let what watches me tonight be kind." And for a fleeting moment, the room feels weightless. The fear doesn't disappear, but it softens, folded gently beneath the wings of something ancient. Unseen, and almost merciful, the lamps burn lower now. Small golden eyes blinking in the half-dark. The perfume, the prayers, the smoke, they've all melted into one continuous haze. The bride sits still, breathing shallowly, her pulse barely visible at the base of her throat. And though the room seems empty, she can feel it, she isn't alone. In ancient Egypt, no important event, especially not a wedding night, was ever truly private. The living never acted without the dead nearby. The Egyptians believed that every home was a layered world, shared with unseen witnesses, ancestors, spirits, guardians, and sometimes gods who had taken an interest in the family line. So tonight, even though the doors are shut and the windows sealed with papyrus screens, there are more guests here than you can count. If you listen carefully, you might hear them, the faint rustle that isn't the wind, the gentle click of something settling that isn't the lamp. It's the sound of the past. Breathing. The bride knows this. She was raised to respect it. When she was a child, she watched her mother leave offerings for the ancestors, bread, figs, beer, sometimes a small bowl of water on the sill so their spirits wouldn't grow thirsty. The dead, after all, were still part of the household. They protected you, advised you, and sometimes they judged you. And on this night, they're here to watch. A small clay shrine stands in the corner, barely visible behind the smoke. Inside it rest the figurines of her ancestors, carved with faces worn smooth from centuries of touch. Their eyes, painted in faded black, catch the flicker of light and seem to move. If you stare long enough, you might believe they're blinking. The air grows colder near that corner. The bride glances toward it, just once, quickly, and lowers her gaze again. You can almost hear the thought that crosses her mind, "Please, let them be kind." The priest's words echo from earlier, the ancestors see. so that the gods need not. It's meant as reassurance, but it doesn't feel like one. There's a difference between being blessed and being watched. Somewhere in the shadows, something shifts, a whisper, a sigh, maybe only the movement of fabric, but she feels it all the same. It's strange, isn't it? We modern souls think of privacy as sacred, but to the ancient Egyptians, being seen by the dead was protection. Loneliness was dangerous. Isolation meant vulnerability. To them, unseen witnesses were comfort, like invisible hands holding the world together. And yet, sitting here, you can sense the paradox. Protection and pressure, intertwined like reeds in the Nile. The bride's fingers tremble as she reaches for the small bronze dish of oil beside her. She dips her fingers into it and traces a spiral on the floor, a symbol of eternity. Meant to welcome the ancestors' blessing. Come softly, she whispers, and keep me from harm. The words dissolve into the thick air. You'd think she's speaking to nothing, but if you look closely, the flame nearest the shrine flickers, bending toward her, just slightly, enough to make your heart skip once. In the mythology of the Nile, ancestors weren't ghosts. They were Aku, luminous ones, beings of light, transformed by death, existing somewhere between the stars and the earth. The Egyptians believed their presence could be felt as warmth, or sometimes as a brief chill when they passed too near. And in that moment, the bride shivers. Maybe the ancestors are offering blessing. Maybe they're simply curious. Maybe they've forgotten what it means to be human and just want to remember. Outside, the night stretches on. The Nile glows faintly in the moonlight, silver threading through the blackness. Somewhere, a frog croaks, a steady, earthy sound, life going on, indifferent to the weight of divine observation. Inside, the bride whispers again, this time almost inaudibly. Mother, if you are here, don't let them take my courage. The silence afterward feels too full to be empty. You start to wonder what these unseen witnesses think. Do they feel pride, pity, nostalgia, or maybe, like the gods themselves, they simply observe, neither cruel nor kind, just endless. The Egyptians loved balance, order, the comfort of knowing that everything, life, death, fear, had its place. And yet, you can sense the tension in that belief tonight. Because every watchful eye, even a loving one, can still feel like a cage. The bride folds her hands in her lap. And for a fleeting moment, the shadows behind her seem to pulse, like wings spreading, or robes shifting. Then they're gone. The lamp pops softly, a bead of oil bursting on the wick. The scent changes, less sweet, more bitter, a reminder that nothing perfect lasts. Somewhere in your own chest, you feel a strange empathy for her, the woman trapped between two worlds, the living and the eternal, the personal and the cosmic. And as the air settles again, she straightens her spine, exhales slowly, and whispers the words taught to every Egyptian child since time immemorial. I am seen by those who came before. I will see those who come after. It's not fear now, it's surrender. A kind of calm born from knowing you are part of something vast, unstoppable, and ancient. The flame steadies, the perfume softens, and for a while, the unseen witnesses keep their silent vigil, guardians, ghosts, or maybe just memory itself. You feel it too, don't you? That thin line between comfort and unease. Between being blessed and being watched. It's the same line she's learning to walk tonight. The night has thickened into velvet now. Even the insects have gone quiet. As if the entire desert is holding its breath. Inside the small chamber, the air trembles with perfume and prayer. The bride kneels before a low stone altar. Her body slick with sacred oils. Her mind hovering somewhere between fear and obedience. The priest returns, carrying a new vessel, a small alabaster jar sealed with wax. He moves carefully, as though holding something alive. The oil of the serpent. He announces softly, and even his voice sounds different now, lower, slower, like he's speaking through water. You can almost hear the words hiss in the air. The bride looks up, her eyes wide. Everyone in Egypt knew of this oil. It wasn't common. It wasn't even legal for most people to touch. It was reserved for one purpose only, to awaken fertility. To invite the goddess into the body. Some said it came from the venom of desert serpents mixed with resin and honey. Others whispered it was symbolic. Drawn from the myth of Isis reviving Osiris with the breath of magic, life created from death. Either way, no one took it lightly. The priest kneels beside her and breaks the wax seal. A faint shimmer rises from the jar, smoke. Maybe. Or steam. The smell hits you immediately, sharp. Metallic. Sweet at the edges. Like rain hitting hot stone. It's both repulsive and magnetic. This, the priest murmurs, dipping his fingers into the shimmering liquid, is the breath of the serpent, the earth's oldest promise. He traces the oil along her collarbone, across her shoulders, then down the inside of her wrists. The touch is ceremonial, distant, but the effect is immediate. Her skin tingles, then warms, then almost hums. She gasps softly, not from pain exactly, but from a sensation that doesn't belong entirely to her. The Egyptians believed the serpent embodied two forces, danger and creation. In shedding its skin, it symbolized rebirth; in its venom, death and healing. To apply its essence was to invite both, life and destruction, into one's own flesh. You can imagine what that means for her. This ritual isn't about beauty anymore. It's transformation, raw and irreversible. The priest steps back, murmuring a chant that sounds half like a lullaby, half like a warning. His shadow stretches across the floor, serpentine and trembling in the lamp's flicker. He lifts the jar one last time, tipping a drop into the brazier. The flames flare green for a moment, then return to gold. The goddess awakens. He whispers. You're not sure if he's talking to the divine, or to her. The bride's breath comes faster now. Her heartbeat drums in her chest, echoing against the walls. She can feel the warmth spreading through her arms, up her neck, into her head. It's dizzying. She grips the edge of the mat, steadying herself. In that haze, she remembers the stories told by older women. How this oil once belonged to the temple of Sekhmet. The lioness goddess, patron of healing and fury. They said the priestesses who handled it wore gloves of woven reeds. And even then, their hands shook. To use the oil was to call upon power too wild to control. And yet, here she is, ordinary, human, trembling, covered in it. You can almost see what she's thinking. What if the goddess doesn't like me? What if I'm too small, too weak, too frightened? The priest finishes his chant. bows his head, and leaves without a word. The silence that follows feels alive. Crawling along the walls, the oil glows faintly in the lamplight, a sheen that looks almost like scales on her skin. She raises her hands before her face. They shimmer, glinting gold and bronze, like the hide of some divine creature. For a strange, fleeting moment, she feels powerful, terrified. Yes, but powerful. That's the paradox of the serpent. It frightens you into remembering that you are alive. The air shifts. A breeze sneaks through the window slit, carrying with it the cool scent of the Nile. It cuts through the perfume. Sharp and grounding, she breathes deeply, trying to hold onto that feeling, real air, real life, not incense or ritual. But then she hears it, a faint rustle behind her. It's probably nothing, fabric shifting, fire settling, but she turns anyway. The shadows stretch along the wall, and for an instant, they don't look human. Something long and fluid moves just beneath the flickering light. Then it's gone. Her breath catches. The Egyptians believed the serpent was a messenger between worlds, between the living and the divine. The earth and the underworld. Its appearance was never random. It was a sign that the veil between realms had thinned. Maybe it's her imagination, maybe it's the oil, seeping into her skin, into her nerves. But she feels eyes on her, ancient, unblinking, neither cruel nor kind. She bows her head and whispers, "I am yours, if you will not harm me." The room answers with a single sound, a soft crack from the brazier as the last drop of oil burns away. You could swear the flame bows in response. Then everything goes still again. The bride remains kneeling, her body warm, her heart unsteady. Somewhere in that stillness, something has changed. The air feels heavier, yes, but also clearer. The fear hasn't vanished, it's become part of her, folded neatly into reverence. That's the secret, isn't it? The ritual was never about removing fear, it was about transforming it. Turning dread into devotion, trembling into worship. She lifts her gaze toward the dark ceiling, whispering one last time, "Let what stirs in me be holy." The lamps flicker, the wind shifts, and the shadows settle once more. Outside, the Nile rolls on, endless and indifferent, carrying with it the reflection of the moon, a silver serpent gliding through black water. By the second night, the house has grown quiet again, but not peacefully quiet. It's the kind of stillness that feels watchful, brittle, ready to shatter with the smallest word. The bride moves through it like a shadow. Her anklets muted, her veil folded neatly on the edge of the sleeping mat. The moonlight filters through the shutters, striping the floor in pale silver. Silence is the new rule now. It's strange, isn't it? How something as simple as not speaking could carry so much weight. In ancient Egypt, words were never just sound, they were power. To speak was to summon. To create, to name something was to give it life. That's why every prayer, every curse, every blessing had to be spoken exactly right, or not at all. So after the wedding rituals, brides were told to remain silent for 3 days, 3 nights without words, to let the gods' will settle into their lives. They called it the resting of the tongue, a poetic way to say, don't disturb the divine machinery. You can see her now, sitting near the small household shrine, her lips parted slightly as though she might say something, but nothing comes. Her throat aches with the effort of restraint. She isn't alone, though. In the corner, her husband sits cross-legged, mending a sandal strap. He hums under his breath, a low tune. Simple and soothing. He isn't forbidden to speak. Not in the same way she is. But he doesn't try to talk to her either. Maybe out of respect, maybe out of fear. Because everyone knows what the priest said, if a bride speaks before the third sunrise, her words will call the wrong ears. The wrong ears, meaning Seth, the god of chaos, storms, and unbridled passion, the same Seth who destroyed Osiris, who defied Ma'at, who turned order into noise. And so, silence became safety. But silence is also a kind of hunger. You can almost feel it gnawing at her. Every thought she swallows becomes a stone in her chest. She wants to ask a dozen questions about the moon, the rituals, the oil that still burns faintly on her skin, about whether fear always feels this heavy, about whether love, when it finally comes, will sound like anything at all. But she can't. So she listens instead, to the scrape of her husband's knife against the sandal's sole, to the murmur of the wind through the shutters, to the steady lap of the Nile beyond the walls, to her own heartbeat, that lonely metronome ticking through the dark. The Egyptians believed that silence could purify the soul, that in quiet, the gods spoke directly to the heart. But they also feared what could grow in unspoken spaces, doubt, desire, rebellion, which is why every act of silence came with a blessing and a curse. You can sense both at work here. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once, then stops. A frog croaks near the river. Life continues, oblivious. Inside, time feels slower, heavier, each moment stretching until it almost snaps. Her husband looks up once, meeting her gaze. There's no need for words. Everything between them now exists in glances. You can see something like understanding pass between them. A quiet pact. Let's just get through this. It's the kind of intimacy the priests never mentioned. Hours slip by. The lamp burns lower. The shadows on the wall lengthen, twist, and merge into strange shapes. The bride traces her finger along the edge of the mat, drawing invisible hieroglyphs into the dust. It's a small rebellion, really, writing without sound. The shapes she draws aren't prayers, though. They're fragments of thought, a bird, a wave, a hand, a single eye, tiny symbols that say what she cannot. I am here. And maybe the gods see. Maybe they don't. In some old texts, there's a story about a woman who broke her silence too soon. She whispered to her reflection in the Nile, asking the goddess to release her. The next morning, her husband found her still kneeling by the water, lips frozen in a perfect circle. They said Seth heard her first. People tell that story to frighten brides, of course. But the truth is quieter. No one knows what really happened. The priest simply wrote. Her tongue offended the silence. You can almost hear the irony. The gods who demand love and loyalty but fear words from those who live it. The bride glances toward the shrine. The figurines of Isis and Osiris gleam faintly, their painted eyes fixed and eternal. She wonders whether they're listening, whether the goddess ever wished to speak first. Her husband finishes his work and sets the sandal aside. He doesn't look at her when he says, softly, tomorrow, the third sun rises. It's the first voice she's heard in hours. It cuts through the silence like a warm knife through wax. She nods once, a small motion that carries both relief and fatigue. Tomorrow, she will be allowed to speak again, to fill the air with sound, to remember what her own voice feels like. You can sense her yearning for it, not just to talk, but to exist audibly again. The thought of it feels like rain after drought. She lies down on the mat, staring at the ceiling. The faint light of the lamp paints the rafters in golden shadow. Somewhere far away, thunder rumbles, a desert storm brewing beyond the horizon. She closes her eyes and smiles. Just barely. A storm means Seth is busy elsewhere tonight. She'll be safe until dawn. And maybe, just maybe, when the sun rises and the curse lifts, her first word won't be prayer or obedience. Maybe it will simply be her name. The silence hums one last time, then softens, folding around her like a blanket. Because silence, even when cursed, can still cradle the brave. The desert dawn rises slow and deliberate, spilling gold over the limestone walls of Thebes. Far from the small clay homes of ordinary brides, the palace stands quiet, massive, radiant, and cold. Its courtyards glitter with polished stone, its columns carved with stories of gods pretending to be men. The air here smells not of incense and oil, but of authority itself. You walk with the breeze through the corridors, your bare feet soundless against the cool floor. The murals stretch endlessly, battles, harvests, offerings, each one declaring the same truth: power is sacred. And here, even love must kneel before it. Because royal weddings were not weddings at all. They were events of cosmic significance. When a pharaoh married, it wasn't merely a union of people, it was the reenactment of divine order. He was Horus, the living god, the son of the sky. His bride, a vessel of Isis, queen of heaven and mother of kings. The others feared the night, but for royal brides, that fear was ritualized into theater. The pharaoh's chamber was unlike any other place in Egypt, a room not meant for rest, but for resurrection. Its walls were covered in gold leaf, etched with scenes of creation, the sun god Ra rising from chaos, the Nile flooding with divine purpose, the moon nursing the earth with her light. Everything shimmered, almost alive. The room itself seemed to breathe. And in the center stood a bed carved from ebony and ivory, shaped like a lion's body. Its head faced east, so the rising sun could watch. Always watching. You can almost feel the weight of it, the expectation, the ritual precision, the haunting beauty. The royal bride entered this chamber veiled from head to toe, escorted by priestesses of Hathor. Each step was counted aloud. 12 steps for each hour of the night. 12 echoes of eternity. At the 13th, she would stop before the bed. A priest awaited her, not to witness, but to command the blessing. His voice would fill the air. The gods rise within you. The river flows eternal. The house of Pharaoh endures. He didn't need to raise his voice. The words themselves carried power. To speak them wrong was to tempt divine chaos. You can imagine how the bride must have felt. This wasn't just a wedding night, it was a public performance of holiness. One meant to reassure an empire that order still reigned. The pharaoh's divinity had to be proven not only on battlefields, but in bedrooms. And so, even here, in the supposed intimacy of the royal chamber, she was never truly alone. Behind carved screens, attendants waited, Priests whispered prayers to Ra, ensuring his blessing. Scribes stood ready to record omens, how long the lamps burned, how the wind moved through the curtains, whether thunder rolled or stars blinked out. Every flicker of candlelight meant something. Every silence was a sentence. No one would ever speak of what happened afterward. The pharaoh would emerge at dawn, radiant, victorious, while the bride, silent, veiled, would retreat to her quarters. The kingdom would celebrate not their love, but their function, the divine machine continuing to turn. And yet, there are stories, whispers passed down through generations, carved secretly into tomb walls and spoken softly in the servants' quarters. Stories that suggest not all royal brides accepted the ritual quietly. One such tale tells of Queen Tiaa, who refused to lie beneath the golden ceiling of the chamber. She insisted that the gods could see her just as clearly beneath the open sky. So she led the pharaoh out onto the palace terrace under the moon. "If I must be divine," she said, "let the heavens be my witness, not walls." The priests were horrified, but when the morning came, the Nile flooded higher than ever recorded. To this day, some say the river rose for her, not him. The pharaoh, of course, took credit. History usually does. But you can feel the echo of her defiance in the still air of the chamber. Even now, centuries later, it lingers, like a scent that refuses to fade. And somewhere, perhaps deep in the afterlife, she laughs softly. Back in the present, the priests continue their rituals. The golden bed remains untouched until sunset, when it will again become an altar. The bride chosen this season, a distant cousin of the pharaoh, prepares in silence. The attendants paint her skin with gold dust, trace sacred symbols across her stomach, and whisper instructions she already knows. She doesn't look afraid, not anymore, just distant, as though she's already left her body behind. You realize that this is the final purpose of all the rituals, the perfumes, the veils, the prayers, the blood. To teach a woman how to separate her soul from her flesh while keeping her eyes open. It's not cruelty, it's ceremony, which, in Egypt, was often the same thing. You watch as the moon rises, casting its silver reflection through the window grill. The chamber comes alive again, shadows dancing across the gold walls. Flames bending like bowing servants. Somewhere outside, the priests begin the first chant of the night. Ra above, Osiris below. Let the breath of life renew the crown. The air grows heavy. Time feels circular here, trapped in its own echo. The same words, the same fear, the same divine theater, performed again and again until no one remembers who wrote it first. And yet, even within all that repetition, you sense the quiet rebellion of every woman who has ever entered this room. They learned to move gracefully through expectation, to survive divinity by pretending to embody it, to wear gold as armor and silence as a spell, to turn ritual into endurance, endurance into legend. You can almost hear their voices now, whispering through the gilded walls, not curses, not prayers, but something in between. We were more than what they saw. Outside, the Nile flows quietly beneath the palace, the eternal witness to both the sacred and the secret. And as the night deepens, the pharaoh's hidden chamber glows like a lantern in the dark, beautiful, haunted, and utterly silent. Morning drifts into the palace like a ghost. The air smells of sand and cedar oil, and the marble halls echo with the soft shuffle of bare feet. Servants move silently, carrying baskets of dates, folded linens, and water jars balanced with impossible grace. They've done this every day of their lives, but after a royal wedding, even routine feels heavier, like the air itself has been instructed to behave. You follow one of them, a girl, maybe 16, her hair braided tight, her eyes careful. Her name is Neferu, though no one ever says it aloud, in the palace. Servants are mostly seen, rarely addressed. She walks toward the queen's quarters, her steps steady but quick. The others whisper behind her, trading fragments of what they heard, what they think they saw, what they imagined must have happened in the pharaoh's hidden chamber last night. The truth doesn't matter as much as the telling. Neferu listens but doesn't join in. She knows that stories, in Egypt, are a kind of currency too dangerous to spend carelessly. But later, when the others are gone and the work is done, she'll tell her version too. They always do. It's how they make sense of a world that's too large for them to touch. Because the rituals of the powerful belong to everyone else only through rumor. She enters the queen's room, where the light is soft and filtered through layers of gauze curtains. The air hums with the faint scent of lotus and something metallic beneath it, faint but unmistakable. The new queen sits by the window, her veil half drawn, eyes fixed on the horizon where the desert meets the sun. Her face is unreadable, carved from serenity itself. Neferu bows deeply and sets down the tray. No words are exchanged. Silence is still expected, even after the second dawn. But as Neferu turns to leave, the queen speaks, softly, almost absently. Do you believe in the gods? The question freezes the air. It's not a trick, but it feels like one. Neferu hesitates, then answers carefully, I believe they are listening, my lady. The queen smiles faintly, though it doesn't reach her eyes. Listening, she repeats, as if tasting the word. Yes, they are always listening. It's not clear whether that comforts or terrifies her. When Neferu leaves, her hands tremble slightly. She'll carry that conversation with her all day, turning it over in her mind like a polished stone. Later, when the servants gather in the kitchen courtyard, the story will come out, soft at first, then louder, reshaped by laughter, envy, fear. She spoke to me, Neferu will whisper. She asked if I believed in the gods. Someone will gasp, another will grin, then she must be blessed, or cursed. And just like that, a new tale will be born. By nightfall, the story will have changed 3 times. In one version, the queen's voice will echo like a goddess. In another, her shadow will flicker on the wall as if someone, or something, stood behind her. In the last, she will be seen crying, her tears turning into pearls before they touch the ground. That's how myths are made here, not by priests or kings, but by those who clean their floors. You can almost hear them now, gathered around the embers of the cooking fire. Their faces glow orange in the flickering light, their eyes wide, their voices quick and hushed. Each woman takes her turn, adding a new layer, a new meaning. She must have seen the god himself. No, she defied him. No, she whispered her true name to the moon. Every version contradicts the last. But that doesn't matter. The truth doesn't survive long in Egypt, it gets gilded, buried, and reborn like everything else. And yet, beneath the embellishments, something human shines through. You can hear it in the rhythm of their voices, the mixture of awe and pity, reverence and rebellion, the way they talk about queens not as symbols, but as women who bleed, who fear, who sometimes wish to be invisible. There's tenderness in that, and also power. Because in a world where speaking truth could invite punishment, storytelling becomes resistance. The servants can't change the rituals of the gods, but they can reinterpret them. They can make the sacred ridiculous, the powerful vulnerable, the divine human, and in those stolen moments of laughter, they reclaim a little piece of freedom. Later that night, Neferu lies on her sleeping mat in the servants' quarters, staring up at the ceiling beams. She listens to the soft breathing of the others, to the rhythmic chirp of crickets outside, and thinks again of the queen's question. Do you believe in the gods? She doesn't know, but she believes in stories, the way they bend reality, the way they make fear bearable. She closes her eyes, whispering to herself, if they are listening, let them hear this. And somewhere above the palace, the stars blink faintly, as if amused. Maybe the gods are listening. Maybe they prefer the servants' stories to the priest's prayers. After all, the gods were born from chaos, and what is gossip, if not a gentler kind of chaos? As the night deepens, the courtyard fills with a low hum of voices, servants retelling their tales. The same words shifting shape again and again like water in the Nile. And beyond the palace walls, in the small mud brick houses by the river, the ordinary brides listen too. Some believe the queen was blessed. Others think she's cursed, but every woman hears a version that sounds like herself. That's how stories survive when truth can't, through the mouths of those who were never meant to speak. You lie back and listen with them, feeling the rhythm of the river echoing through the city, through centuries, through every whispered retelling. The gods, if they're listening, must be smiling, because silence might be sacred, but stories are immortal. By the fourth dawn, the household has learned how to breathe again. The worst of the rituals are behind them, and the gods, if they were displeased, have chosen not to show it. The air feels lighter, though the walls still hum faintly with incense and memory. The bride, now officially a wife, sits in the courtyard, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Around her, the morning is alive. Doves coo on the roof beams. A servant sweeps sand from the threshold, and the Nile glimmers just beyond the gate. For the first time in days, there are no priests, no chants, no instructions, only silence, the ordinary kind, the kind that belongs to people again. But even ordinary silence in Egypt carried symbols. She's waiting for one last ritual, though this one is gentler. The older women of the household are coming soon, bringing with them a collection of charms and talismans, the amulets of protection that every new wife must wear for 7 days. They'll drape her in color and magic, the way others might dress for armor. When they arrive, the courtyard fills with warm chatter and the clink of jewelry. The air smells of clay, honey, and fresh linen. It's a different kind of sacred, domestic, familiar, almost kind. You can feel her shoulders relax for the first time since the wedding began. The eldest woman opens a woven basket and begins laying out the amulets. One by one, They gleam under the morning light. A bright turquoise scarab, carved with tiny wings. An ankh of red jasper, symbol of life everlasting. A small golden cat, its eyes made of obsidian. A coiled serpent, its tongue frozen mid-hiss. And finally, a rough piece of lapis lazuli, deep blue and veined with white, for truth, the woman says, and for protection against envy. Each charm has a story, and the women tell them as they work. The scarab, they say, rolls the sun across the sky each day, ensuring rebirth. Wear it close to your heart. One whispers, so that your love rises new each morning. The ankh promises longevity, though. As one ant jokes, only if you eat your lentils and avoid men who think they're gods. The others laugh, their laughter soft but real. For a moment, you can almost forget that this is a world ruled by fear and divinity. For a moment, it's just women talking, sharing fragments of courage disguised as superstition. The cat, of course, belongs to Bastet, the goddess of the home, of joy, of the tiny rebellions that make life bearable. She watches over women who refuse to bow too low. One woman murmurs as she ties the charm to the bride's wrist. You notice how the bride smiles at that one. Just slightly. The serpent amulet goes around her neck last. The same creature that frightened her 2 nights ago now rests against her skin like a friend. Fear turned inward becomes wisdom, says the eldest woman. Let it guard your words. You realize, as they do, that these amulets are more than protection, they're lessons. Carried on a string, every symbol a memory, every charm a quiet manifesto disguised as jewelry. When the last charm is tied, the eldest woman steps back and says, "There, the gods can look, but they cannot touch." It's meant as reassurance, but it sounds suspiciously like defiance. The bride stands, feeling the weight of the amulets shift as she moves. They clink softly together, a symphony of small, deliberate sounds. You can almost imagine them whispering to one another, the cat purring, the serpent hissing, the scarab clicking its wings. The women begin to tidy up, chatting about mundane things, market prices, the neighbor's new donkey, a child's fever cured by honey and fig leaves. Life slides quietly back into its rhythm. The sacred recedes, the human returns. But not completely. Because after they leave, she sits alone again and traces her fingers over the charms. One by one, the metal is warm from her skin. Each amulet hums faintly, as if alive with everything that's been said and suffered in its name. She looks at her reflection in a copper basin beside her. The amulets shimmer like constellations against her collarbone. Protection, she whispers. The word tastes strange on her tongue, half faith, half wish. Then, almost playfully, she adds, "From gods or from men?" No one answers, but the wind picks up slightly, ruffling her hair. The blue lapis catches the sun, flashing once like a wink. You can almost believe the charms heard her. Outside, a priest's chant drifts faintly through the air from another house, someone else's ritual, someone else's fear. The sound fades quickly under the noise of the city waking, traders shouting, donkeys braying, the splash of water as jars are filled. The world keeps turning, the Nile keeps breathing. And she, this new wife, this quiet survivor of sacred ceremonies, keeps sitting there, learning how to belong to herself again. The amulets glint with each breath, a soft reminder that even in a world ruled by gods, humans still find ways to make their own magic. Later, when she rises to fetch water, the serpent charm swings forward and catches the light. For an instant, it looks alive. She smiles. Then guard me well, she murmurs. Maybe it will. Maybe it already has. Because protection, she realizes, was never about the charms themselves. It was about the hands that tied them, the voices that whispered comfort, the women who laughed softly in defiance of divine fear. That, more than any spell, is what keeps her safe. The Nile sighs in the distance. The morning sun brightens the amulets, turning them to fire, and somewhere between earth and heaven, even the gods must pause to watch the small, brilliant rebellion of a woman learning to live beyond her rituals. Weeks pass. The sharp edges of ritual begin to blur into the rhythm of everyday life. The palace hums with ordinary sounds again, servants laughing softly, water splashing in basins, the distant pulse of drums from the harbor. Time, as always, moves on, carrying the weight of ceremony like silk carried by the river. The new queen, no longer a trembling bride, now walks through the palace gardens with slower, more certain steps. The linen of her gown catches the morning light. Her bracelets clink like distant bells. She breathes the scent of lotus blossoms floating in the ponds. And for the first time in what feels like forever, the air tastes like freedom. Or something close to it. Because beneath the calm, there's something new growing inside her, a quiet awareness. A heaviness low in her belly that she hasn't spoken of to anyone. Not yet. It began as faint nausea at dawn. A strange sweetness on her tongue when she drank water. A subtle warmth that didn't fade with the day. She recognized it before the midwives did. Women always do. The pharaoh's heir, if the gods willed it, had begun his first journey. In ancient Egypt, pregnancy wasn't just biology, it was divinity renewed. The Nile flooded once a year to ensure the land's fertility. And the women of Egypt were seen as mirrors of that same rhythm. A pregnant woman was the living embodiment of the river, life swelling, water rising, promise returning. And yet, even miracles come with fear. The queen keeps her secret for several weeks. Every day, she rises before dawn, walks to the edge of the palace terrace, and watches the river. It's said that the Nile knows before anyone else, that its water turns a slightly deeper blue when a child of divine blood is conceived. She looks for that change each morning. She swears she sees it. The priests would call it coincidence. The poets would call it destiny. The truth, as always, hides somewhere between. When the royal physician finally confirms her suspicion, the palace erupts. Bells ring from the towers. Priests hurry through corridors, and the pharaoh himself kneels before the gods' statues in gratitude. But the queen? She sits quietly by the river, hands folded over her stomach, unsure whether to weep or smile. You can almost hear her thoughts, the mixture of pride, fear, and awe. To carry a child is sacred. To carry a royal child is terrifying. The priests will call it a blessing. The servants will whisper that it's an omen. And the world will watch her every breath for signs of divine favor. A week later, the high priest of Heliopolis arrives with gifts and rituals. He carries a golden basin filled with Nile water and lotus flowers. symbols of rebirth. As he pours the water over her hands, he murmurs, "The river has chosen you. The gods have seen your worth." You can feel her flinch slightly at the word chosen. Choice, for her, has always meant surrender dressed as destiny. Still, she smiles. The mask of serenity, the one she learned to wear on her wedding night, fits perfectly now. From that moment, she's no longer simply a woman, she's the vessel of Egypt's future. Her days are filled with chants, her nights with careful dreams. The palace astrologers record the stars' positions on the night of conception, searching for signs of prosperity or disaster. Midwives place protective amulets near her bed, frogs for fertility, cobras for strength, and a small clay crocodile, Sobek's blessing, for safe passage through the flood of birth. The irony is hard to ignore. The gods who bless life are also the ones who take it away. Every month, the queen walks to the riverbank under the moon, accompanied by priestesses. There, she kneels, touches the water, and whispers, "You carried the gods before me. Carry me now." The ritual is ancient, passed from mother to daughter for centuries. The Nile is both cradle and tomb, creation and undoing. Its water is life, but also warning. You imagine her reflection trembling on the surface, the silver ripples breaking her face into fragments. She doesn't look divine then, she looks human. Frightened, young, she dips her hand into the water. And for a moment, the current pulls harder than usual. She gasps, steadying herself. The priestesses whisper it's a sign. Sobek, the crocodile god, is testing her resolve. But maybe it's just the river reminding her of a truth older than gods. Creation always demands surrender. As months pass, her body changes. The swelling of her belly becomes public proof of the gods' favor. Songs are written, offerings are made. Every citizen who passes through the temple prays not for her, but for what she carries. And she, this woman who once feared her own wedding night, learns to carry that collective hope in silence. One afternoon, as the sun begins to fall, she walks alone to the edge of the palace gardens. The air is soft and warm, and the river glows with the color of honey. She sits on the bank and whispers to the water, "They will call you a son of the Nile, but you'll be my child first." The current answers with a low ripple, the reeds swaying like they're listening. For a heartbeat, you could swear the river smiles. It's a small, private act of rebellion, to claim what the world insists belongs to the gods. But it's also the purest form of faith. Because faith, in Egypt, was never about obedience, it was about endurance, the ability to keep loving, to keep believing, even when everything around you belongs to someone else. And as the sun dips below the horizon, the queen closes her eyes, resting one hand on her stomach and the other in the cool Nile water. The breeze smells faintly of lotus and rain. The priests will say the child belongs to Ra. The pharaoh will say the child belongs to Egypt. But tonight, under the breath of the river, she allows herself one silent truth. The child belongs to her. The moon rises, the Nile breathes, and somewhere in that vast, glittering reflection, a new life begins to stir. Centuries have passed since the queen whispered to the Nile. The palaces have crumbled, the temples lie in sand, and the voices that once filled Egypt's night are now only echoes beneath stone. But the story of those rituals, the veils, The oils, the silence, the blood, still drifts through time like dust caught in sunlight. And as with all things touched by history, no one agrees on what any of it truly meant. You walk now through a museum instead of a palace. The walls are cool and white. The glass case is filled with relics that were once sacred and terrifying. The air hums with the sound of distant air conditioning rather than chants. Tourists shuffle by, murmuring, pointing, taking photos. The gods of the Nile have become exhibits. Behind one pane of glass sits an alabaster jar labeled perfumed oil, Dynasty the 18th. The plaque says it was likely used in bridal or funerary rituals. The words are cautious, likely, possibly, presumed. The truth, it seems, has learned to wear a veil of its own. You lean closer. The oil residue inside is faintly golden. Dry now, but if you could smell it, you know it would still carry the ghost of myrrh, serpent resin, and fear. Across the room, two historians stand in quiet debate, their voices careful but firm. One insists that the wedding rituals of ancient Egypt were empowering, that women held spiritual authority as embodiments of Isis, that their participation was an honor. The other shakes her head. Honor, she says, is a word history uses when it wants obedience to look beautiful. And there it is, the argument that never dies. Were these women holy, or were they haunted? Were the rituals meant to elevate them, or to control them? Did they fear the gods, or simply the men who spoke in their names? Every scholar has their evidence, fragments of papyrus, murals half erased by time, amulets buried with promises no one can translate. They interpret the same silence in opposite ways. One papyrus, known as the Hymn of Hather's Veil, describes the goddess blessing brides with fertility and joy, her laughter echoing through the temple. Another fragment, found in a worker's tomb, carries a darker line. She entered the room of incense, and the air forgot her name. Maybe both were true. You move to another display. A small figurine of a woman kneeling before a serpent god. The plaque reads, "Symbol of the bride's surrender to divine union." Surrender, that word again. Painted in neutral tones, scrubbed of emotion. A group of students gathers nearby as their professor speaks. Remember, he says, the Egyptians didn't view marriage as romantic. It was social, economic, cosmic. A woman's body was a symbol of order, of renewal. Her participation in ritual was essential to maintaining Ma'a, the balance of the universe. He gestures toward the display. Satisfied, the students nod, scribbling notes. None of them look at the woman in the figurine long enough to imagine how she felt. You do. You picture her not as an artifact, but as a person breathing incense, feeling oil burn against her skin, whispering prayers into smoke that never answered. You realize that history, in its polite detachment, forgets texture. It forgets heartbeat. It forgets fear. And yet, those same historians are right about something. Without these rituals, the Egyptians might not have survived at all. Every civilization needs stories to make sense of pain, to justify the unknowable. Maybe that's what all this was. A vast attempt to explain the fragile, terrifying beauty of being human. One scholar, an older woman with silver hair and ink-stained fingers, speaks quietly to her assistant. I think they were afraid, she says. not just of the gods, but of love itself. The rituals gave them rules. And rules are comforting when you're small in an enormous universe. Her assistant tilts his head. So you think it was fear disguised as faith? She smiles faintly. Is there a difference? You find yourself standing before a final case, a wedding veil. Perfectly preserved, its threads golden and impossibly thin. The placard says it belonged to a noblewoman of Thebes. Circa 1350 BCE. You imagine her wearing it. Her breath caught beneath its shimmer. Her voice locked behind linen. The guidebook describes it as an exquisite example of ancient modesty. You think it looks more like a net. You wonder what she whispered beneath it. Did she pray for divine favor, or simply for morning to come faster? Outside the museum, the modern city roars, horns, vendors, traffic, laughter. The Nile still glides by, endless and indifferent, carrying the same reflections it carried thousands of years ago. The debates will continue. They always do. Scholars will publish papers. Documentaries will dramatize the myths. Tourists will marvel at gold masks and painted walls. But the truth of those nights, the smell, the tremor, the silent prayers, will stay somewhere else. Unreachable. Maybe buried beneath sand, maybe hidden in memory, maybe still breathing inside the river. Because history, for all its precision, can't measure what it means to be afraid. And you, standing here centuries later, realize that every civilization hides its fear behind beauty. The Egyptians used gold and incense, we use glass and language. Different altars, same worship. The historian's voice fades behind you. The sound of the city returns. The Nile moves on. And somewhere in that endless current, the past keeps whispering, not facts, not evidence, but something truer, softer. We were here. We were afraid. We tried to make it holy. The sun has long set over the Nile, and Cairo's modern skyline glitters like a constellation of restless stars. The river below carries its eternal hum, though now it mingles with the sounds of engines, laughter, and distant music. Yet if you listen closely, beyond the static, beyond the hum of electric light, you can almost hear another sound beneath it. A whisper. A rhythm older than the city itself. It's the same one that echoed through the temples of Thebes and the chambers of the pharaoh's brides. The pulse of fear and faith intertwined. Time has done what it always does, change everything. And nothing at all. You walk along the riverbank, tracing the same curve where once the queen knelt, where women whispered prayers to the moon, where the scent of lotus and incense floated in the heat. Now the air smells of petrol, street food, and rain, but the river still breathes. It still remembers. And somewhere beneath its dark surface, history stirs. The old stories have not vanished. They simply learned new disguises. The rituals are gone, but the patterns remain. Echoes of submission dressed as devotion, of silence mistaken for virtue. Modern women in Cairo laugh, work, study, argue, love, yet in certain moments, when the world grows quiet, some of them still feel it. That ancient inheritance humming in their bones. The expectation to be holy, to be humble, to be everything except loud. It's strange how fear can survive longer than temples. But then again, maybe fear isn't the enemy. Maybe it's the teacher. You pass a bridge lit by neon signs. the colors flickering red and gold on the water. Across it walks a young woman in jeans and a headscarf, earbuds in her ears, mouthing along to an English song. She doesn't see herself as part of any ancient story. And yet, she is. So are you. The setting has changed, the language too, but the essence? The longing for freedom, the dance between reverence and rebellion, it never really disappears. You stop by the edge of the water. The current laps softly at the stones. Somewhere nearby, a vendor sells tea from a brass kettle. Its steam twisting into the cool air. The smell reminds you faintly of myrrh, of honey, of burnt oil, the ghosts of ancient perfumes drifting through the centuries. If the old brides of Egypt could stand beside you now, what would they think? Would they recognize this world, where love is spoken openly and choice is no longer dressed in ritual? Or would they smile sadly, knowing that freedom, like faith, always comes with new forms of fear? You imagine them, hundreds of them, standing in a line along the river. Their veils made of starlight and memory. Their voices rise not as a chant, but as a sigh. We did what we were told. They murmur. We made fear into beauty. We made silence into survival. And maybe they're proud of that. Maybe they should be. Because those women, long ago, turned pain into story, and story into endurance. They carried a civilization on their shoulders while pretending to bow before gods. Their strength was not loud, but it was eternal. You take a deep breath, the cool air brushing your face. Somewhere in the distance, a call to prayer rises, a sound that would have been foreign to the ancient Egyptians but familiar in its rhythm. It's yearning, it's belief that someone, somewhere, is listening. Faith changes its name, but not its purpose. You close your eyes and picture the queen again, the one who whispered to the Nile. The one who feared her wedding night and later called the river her friend. You wonder if she'd be surprised to know that thousands of years later, people still speak of her, not as a goddess, not as a myth, but as a woman who lived, feared, and loved in a world that demanded perfection. The thought brings an odd comfort. History, for all its cruelty, has a kind of tenderness too. It keeps the echoes, even when it forgets the names. A warm breeze ripples through your hair. Somewhere upstream, a child laughs, a bright, sharp sound that slices clean through the weight of time. The sound bounces across the river, across centuries, across the invisible divide between what was and what is. And for just a moment, you can feel everything align, the pulse of the modern city, the memory of the old world, the quiet rhythm of your own heartbeat, all beating in the same time signature. The women of Egypt are still here. Their echoes live in every voice that refuses to go silent, in every choice made freely, in every small act of defiance that says, I exist beyond your ritual. The river glows silver under the street lights. Ancient and infinite, you whisper to it softly, almost shyly, as if continuing a conversation started thousands of years ago. They feared you once, didn't they? But now, we remember you kindly. The Nile answers with a sigh. Or maybe it's just the wind. Either way, the sound feels like forgiveness. You turn to leave, the city alive behind you. The past humming beneath your feet. The echo follows, soft, familiar, endless. Because time doesn't erase, it only rewrites. And every story, no matter how ancient, eventually finds its way back to the water. The city quiets as midnight drifts over Cairo. The call to prayer fades into the hum of traffic, and the Nile lies still beneath a sky full of tired stars. You stand at its edge, the cool air brushing against your skin, smelling faintly of wet stone and wind-blown dust. Somewhere far beyond the lights and the bridges, the desert begins, a silent ocean of gold, stretching into the dark. That's where it all started, and where it all ends. You close your eyes, and the present folds away. The noise of the city softens until it sounds like water moving through reeds. The air grows warmer, heavier, sweeter. When you open your eyes again, you're standing in the Egypt of memory, its temples intact, its priests alive, its moon as bright as it was thousands of years ago. The sand glows faintly in the lunar light, and you can see her there, the queen. Older now, her hair streaked with silver, her back straight as an obelisk. She walks barefoot along the riverbank, her amulets clinking softly, her linen robes fluttering like whispering ghosts. She no longer fears the gods, or perhaps she simply learned to live beside them. The Nile sighs gently, its surface trembling with moonlight. She kneels and dips her hands into the cool water. The ripples spread outward, catching the stars, folding them into their silver currents. It has been long, she murmurs, her voice like dry reeds in the wind, and yet you still remember me. You feel it too, the sense that the river listens, that all her whispers, all her prayers, all her unspoken fears, were carried here and never left. The queen smiles, faint but real. She has seen kingdoms rise and fall. She has outlived the priests, the myths, even the words that once defined her. And in that vast silence, she has discovered something the gods never taught. Peace doesn't come from worship. It comes from rest. She leans back on her hands, letting the sand cradle her. The night wind moves gently through the reeds. And for a moment, it sounds like voices, the echoes of all the women who came before her. You can almost hear them laughing softly. That low, secret laughter of those who finally learned that survival itself is sacred. Above her, the constellations burn faintly through the haze, the same stars that once guided the builders of pyramids. The same ones she looked to as a frightened bride. They haven't changed, they never do. Her eyes close. Do you see? She whispers. All fear becomes story, and every story becomes dust. And then she exhales, a long, slow breath that blends with the desert wind. The sand begins to move around her, not burying, not erasing, just folding her gently into itself. Like an embrace, the moonlight flickers on the shifting grains, turning them to silver. Her amulets shimmer one last time before disappearing beneath the surface, their colors dimming into the earth. For a long moment, there is only the sound of the river. Eternal and unhurried, the world feels suspended, no time, no history. Just the rhythm of water and wind. And then, softly, the world resumes. The desert sighs, the Nile glides, the stars continue their slow procession across the sky. Somewhere far away, a child cries out in sleep, and his mother hums him quiet. A small sound, fragile and human, but it carries the same note the priests once chanted. The same heartbeat that pulsed through all the rituals and fears and prayers of the past. The song of life, unchanged, undying. You feel it settle over you now. warm and infinite. The scent of lotus and river water lingers faintly in the air. The queen's story dissolves into the sand, her voice blending with the whispers of countless others, all saying the same thing in different tongues. We lived. We loved. We endured. The desert wind softens to a lullaby, brushing your cheek like a hand that's both ancient and familiar. The Nile gleams faintly under the last thin light of the moon, carrying all the forgotten names downstream, toward the sea. It's time to rest. You take one last breath, slow, deep, and steady, and feel the night closing gently around you. Cool and kind, the world grows quieter still. The stars dim slightly, and even the river seems to hush, as though afraid to wake you. And in that final stillness, you can almost hear her voice again, far away, calm and sure. All that is sacred begins with fear, and ends with peace. The wind carries the words across the sand, through time, through memory, through you. Then the sound fades into the deep, endless hush of Egypt's night, soft, steady, eternal. End of script. Sweet dreams.